to be clear, I'm Neil, and
Hi, I'm Harper.
there we go. Now you know the difference. So first, I think we'll start off Harper, I want you to introduce yourself. We're going to spend a lot more time getting to know him, and hopefully I can guide this conversation because Harper and I go way back. So take it away.
Hi, my name is Harper Reed. You just heard my bio, which I think is on from my website. And they talk a lot about how I build paradigm-shifting technology, but the secret is I have no idea what that means. And so what normally, I have done throughout my career is I think I've just been accidentally in the right place at the right time. And so I've done a lot of strange things. Particularly, I worked at a company called Threadless, where we, kind of a little bit before I got there, but the company invented crowdsourcing, which has turned out to be quite an interesting thing on the internet. After that, I worked at a couple other spots, but primarily known for working at the Obama campaign in 2012, where I was a CTO and helped design a lot of the technology that we used. And that actually worked out pretty well, which is good. And I'm pretty happy with that result. Thank you. I probably wouldn't be up on stage if we would have lost, which is good. We also would be invading Canada right now, so things are, I think, positive. And we may talk about politics later. They're not as positive right now. So I did that, and then I had a little company that I called Modest. I try and name everything after myself, and as you can imagine, I'm a pretty modest person, and so we named this company Modest because we were trying to do a little tiny bit of work within the world of commerce, and commerce on the internet. How many people here buy things on the internet? Okay, good. So commerce on the internet is still going, and we just felt that it sucks, to be honest, and that we could make it better, and so we spent a lot of time making it better. And then we found that we had a really good product, and we were really bad at sales. And then we found a company that was really good at sales and was interested in our product called PayPal. And PayPal acquired our company about a year ago. And so I now work at PayPal, which is a fascinating experience, both in that they have such a neat product and such amazing kind of global reach. But then also it's a company with about 20,000 people, which is about 19,000 people, more people than I've ever worked with. So that's kind of an interesting situation. And that kind of brings us to today, but I think that the key is that most of those things were more accidental. I just wanted to do something that was fun, that was interesting, that I believed in, more so than I was trying to have a career or sell out.
So Harper, although the theme of today is speed, I want to slow down time a little bit because you kind of glossed over something I think that was really important, which is how the heck you got in as CTO for Barack Obama's re-election campaign.
This is a relatively unsatisfying story. Mostly because I was actually here at UFC at a panel for David Axelrod's Institute of Politics. It was all these amazing Politico types. And I was last in line to say how we got into politics. And from the very beginning, there's probably 7 people to my right. And from the very beginning, they were like, my father was a congressperson, or I volunteered for campaigns when I was 10. And it got to me, and I was just like, I met a guy in a coffee shop. And it wasn't so kind of silly as that, but it really was that. A lot of my life has been powered by networking. And you think about the internet, and a lot of the internet is all about networks and nodes and how do you get from one place to another. And in many ways, my professional life has been powered by that. And I actually think this is something that most people's lives are powered by, whether it's a community like a church or some community center, or whether it's a coffee shop or whatever it is. You have these nodes that you interact with, and you meet people and you participate in various aspects of your life through those people. It just so happened that a friend of mine said, hey, you should meet this guy, Michael Slaby, who's here in Chicago. He was a CTO in 2008. And you should meet him and just chat with him about what he has going on. And I had no idea that that would lead to becoming CTO, and it was definitely something that I had never considered as an option for a career or really any. I had volunteered for Obama in 2008. And I had planned to in 2012, and so I met Michael Slaby at a coffee shop in Wicker Park called Wormhole, which is a very nerdy coffee shop. They have a DeLorean inside of it, in case you want to time travel. And we just met there, and his partner, Lydia, was studying for the bar, and we just kind of had a quick conversation, and he basically was like, we're looking for any tech help you can give. And so at that point, I just kind of started and said, oh yeah, I have a lot of ideas, and I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of people that we can get together and do this. That was kind of it. But the trick here was I had no idea that I was interviewing for CTO until I was in the interview for CTO. And in this very kind of Dick Cheney moment, the person in front of me said, answered the phone and said, hey, you know, I have to call you back. I'm interviewing a CTO candidate. And I was just like, where? Well, I can leave, you know, if the CTO candidate, if they want to come in, I can get out of your hair or whatever. And then it was kind of like in those movies where they zoom in and pull out at the same time, you know, and you're just like, oh no. Except it wasn't oh no, it was probably a little more rude than that, and in my head. And I just played it cool. And then before I went into this meeting, I was texting some friends. I have this little cohort that I've really interacted with for the last couple years. And I was just like, going to meet the campaign manager, this should be interesting. And then I'd leave and I'm just like, I may have gotten a job. And I'd been, for that time, which is right when, kind of about a year after Neil and I met, I'd basically been avoiding a job for about 18 months. And my partner kept saying, have you thought about getting a job? And I kept saying, yeah. Thought about it, decided not to. And because I wanted to learn more. So my first job out of college, I worked at a company called World Book. Does anyone remember World Book or know World Book? So World Book Publishing, I graduated school in 2001, and 2001 had a really interesting point to it, which is all of the tech companies stopped hiring instantly. I graduated immediately, they were like, no more hiring. And this is obviously not because I graduated, this is because I was the first dot-com bust. But I didn't really notice the dot-com bust. I more noticed that I wasn't gonna get any jobs except from a 100-year-old publishing company. And so I joined the 100-year-old publishing company, and this is actually a good segue into kind of our topic, the speed of the internet. Because one of the first meetings I had was with these executives who were a lot older than I was and who wore ties every day. They were like, can you emulate a page turn on the internet? And in my head I was like, why would you do that? And it was this example of kind of where, for me, in my world, my paradigm had already shifted. But many times around us, our paradigm hasn't shifted yet. And so it was a little bit about how do you bring these folks around me into this paradigm that I'm now living in. Whereas some of the language, some of the vocabulary and whatnot becomes incommensurable in those situations where you're just hitting a wall. And so how do you solve that problem? I just quit. That's how I solved it. I was like, I can't solve this. These people are never going to learn how to do this. I remember very specifically them saying, Wikipedia will never work. It was a very good experience. I built a lot of encyclopedias, specifically a Spanish language encyclopedia, which was really fun. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about programming, learned a lot about building big infrastructure, and it was really exciting. But it was a 100-year-old company. And I then went to Threadless, which was a 5-year-old company at the time. And then Threadless had all these it was kind of like a winding river. Like you never knew in a month which direction we'd be headed. Like many startups, many small companies, you move a lot, you make different decisions, and your whole company shifts to the right or to the left. And you never kind of know where your destination is. And a little bit that kind of drove me crazy because I'd worked for this 100-year-old company that the destination was just encyclopedias. Everyone knew, everyone agreed. And you could say, this is what we're here for. And every day you woke up and you said, what am I going to do today? And you were like, well, I'm going to go to the encyclopedia mines and mine for encyclopedias. And that's kind of what you did every day. Whereas Threadless, we knew we were making T-shirts and we knew we were doing crowdsourcing, but we didn't know if we wanted to do retail or if we wanted to do web or all these kind of questions. And then when I left Threadless, I thought, how do you make a company like Threadless last 100 years? Because my expectation was that your company should last 100 years. I've quickly learned that that's not normal. In fact, that companies don't last 100 years. But I spent a long time trying to figure out how do you make something last a long time. I like that the topic is like the speed of the internet, and I'm like, how do we slow things down? Let's slow it down as much as we can, which might be a reaction too.
Well, there's another part that happened really fast. So I remember, it was around 5 years ago when everything sped up for you. So once you came in as CTO, you went on an insane hiring spree during the Obama campaign. Is that correct? And I'm one of those people that were a part of that.
Well, Neil's just trying to get me to tell you about Neil for a sec, which I will, because I've never seen anyone beg the question so strongly. So this is what happened. I sit there and I meet Neil and a few of his friends, and they're starting a company. And I was like, okay, cool, some young people starting a company, this is great. And they're doing crazy things. So first of all, this is the thing you won't learn about Neil. Neil kicked his dad out of his house so he could use his house as an office.
In Hyde Park. I'm a Hyde Parker.
And so I show up in Hyde Park, and he's like, yeah, this is where my dad used to live. And I'm just like, where's your dad now? He's like, I kicked him out. We needed an office. And I'm like, there aren't other offices? You had to kick your dad out of his house? So anyway, so I learn, and I'm just like, this is a great idea, but you can do this later. You're young. You don't need to do this now. You need to join me on the Obama campaign. And he's like, let me think about it. Nope. And I'm like, what do you mean no? You can't say no to this. Like, this is, not only are you from Hyde Park, but this guy lives in Hyde Park. You can work with us. And he's just like, nope, I got to do my thing, which was good. Because if he would have joined me, he also wouldn't be on stage today.
It's true.
Because Neil went on to do a lot of other stuff. Enough about Neil. Let's get back to me.
So all those people that you had to hire for the Obama
So we had to
campaign,
hire a lot
how'd
of
you do
people.
that?
Well, it goes back to networks, to be honest. Like, it really is about networking. I think about my first experience with networking would have been bulletin board services on the computer, using a modem to dial up. And really what that was about, again, is these nodes. But the property there that was interesting were the nodes were not connected. Where they were, but they were connected very kind of asynchronously. And as the internet has come, I mean, now it's been around for quite a while, we're all kind of used to it. How many people here are on Facebook? Okay, well, I should have asked that the opposite. How many aren't on Facebook? Okay, so you guys should probably get on Facebook. It's super cool. Actually, I hate it. It's terrible. And I'll tell you why. But anyway, I was talking about nodes and networks. And so one of the things I've tried to do throughout my entire life is to build a network. Because you really never know who will come to the rescue. You never know who is going to be the person that changes everything. And so for pretty much the entire time I've been in Chicago, which is since 2001, I've been trying to build this network of people around Chicago. And just trying to make sure that I kind of know in my head, maybe not necessarily quantified in a text file or something like that, like, you know, what is Neil good at? What is the thing that that I could call Neil for? And then I easily, when I need that thing, I'll call Neil and say, Neil, you know, I need some help here. But it's like that, having that catalog of people and that network really helped when I was hiring, because I need to hire really fast. And we need to hire kind of instantly. But I think hiring's kind of boring.
Yeah, so there's an instant nature of some of the things that have happened with technology that's kind of enabled things in your life, but also have almost inhibited you in certain ways. So once you finished the campaign, I think you took a week off and you did some interesting things there where you disconnected, right?
Yeah. How many people here have an iPhone that they use every day? Okay, good. Keep your hands up. How many people check your email all the time on the iPhone? How many people just checked it? Okay, good. So the thing I found is on the campaign, it's really stressful, really intense. You know, every single moment of every single day, we were trying to win, make sure that our guy got elected. And this was really an insane time of my life. It was one of the most stressful things that I'd ever experienced. In the middle of it, I had a terrible breakdown where I was like, oh my God, if we lose, they'll all think it was me, which was true. But we won. So they all thought it was me anyway. So, but it worked out in my favor that time. But the thing was, it was really stressful, really scary, really hard. All these things that were kind of these emotions that normally I hadn't had in my jobs of luxury, of like sitting in front of a computer a couple hours a day and, you know, programming and doing things that I really enjoyed. Because my hobby was also basically my work. So this is the first time that my hobby kind of bit back, where it was suddenly hard and scary. And so afterwards, we win, and the campaign has this interesting property, which all campaigns do, which is when it's over, they just fire everyone immediately. So like the day after the election, the president comes, you know, gives everyone hugs, says hi, shakes everyone's hand, then the next day you're fired. And it's a little bittersweet. I mean, you know it's coming. No one's like, oh, and you'll have a job forever in the campaign of foreverness. No, that doesn't happen. Really what they just tell you that, but then it's shocking, because then you're done. Except for me. I had to stick around to make sure that there was some you know, loose ends that were no longer loose. What is the opposite of a loose end? Yeah, nobody knows. What is it? A tight end. Yeah, that's exactly right. So we had I was looking for tight ends. I'll go back to the loose ends. So I was trying to wrap up some loose ends, and so I just sat there. But the thing was, everyone else was gone. It went from an organization of 6,000 full employed people to, with volunteers, up to 2 million people to about 20. So my inbox went from more emails than anyone should naturally get to basically 0 emails. And I was stressed. I had this like rage, this like I was missing out, like suddenly I wasn't important. It's like all these emotions. And my partner, Hiromi, was like, you gotta get out of here. You gotta split, man. And I was like, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? So I thought about all the places that I would normally go. And I realized that I didn't want to be around anyone. I didn't want to be around the internet. I really wanted a detox. And so I called a friend and I said, where would you go where you know no one? And he said, San Diego. So I went to San Diego. Well, it turns out I did not know anyone, which was kind of funny and unique. Now I do know some people, but I went to San Diego. I stayed at this weird, I don't even know what you'd call it. It was right next to a Legoland, which I didn't even know was a thing, during an off season. So there was nobody there. It was just me and the bar and my Kindle that had no internet. I had no phone, I had no internet, I had no email. And for about a week, I just read World War II history. Uplifting. And it was really good though, but I came back and I was refreshed. And I had this thing, I would talk to my brother or my business partner Dylan. They're both named Dylan actually. My brother Dylan and my business partner Dylan, separate people. And my partner Hiromi, and I talked to them on the phone and they would always say like, wow, you're just so present. I just ignored that actually. Because aren't we all present with our devices in front of us, looking at them all the time?
Yeah, so Harper, the other kind of angle here is it's been 4 years since you ended the Obama campaign, you got elected, and then now a lot has happened since then. And we're at a very interesting time. So you started a company, you sold your company, now you're at PayPal. We're on the cusp of a new election. So what's your take on how the internet has kind of evolved and changed and enabled or even disabled certain campaign tactics and evolutions in technology?
In early 2013, I had an opportunity to speak at a TED event, and TED said, "Do you want to do a talk internal to TED?" They call it TED-U, and so I said, "Yeah, I'll do a talk." And so I just talked about my quick experiences on the campaign, and I left it with a couple thoughts about the future of elections and the future of campaigns. And the final thought was that security, specifically information security and computer security, is going to be a bigger part of campaigns going forward, because I felt. That's not really a joke. I mean, I guess it could be, huh? But I felt that the thing is that we've watched this happen before in different countries where, freedom is threatened by simple, like kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word without saying a swear word. I swear like a sailor. It's one of the things you learned on the campaign. So in these situations where I have a mic in my hand from a bunch of people I don't know, I pause. Every time I pause, I'm thinking of a swear word. Anyway, there you go. Anyway, like it's something that happens all over the world, but it hadn't yet happened to the U.S. where we were messed with by a foreign entity. Although in 2008, the government did say that some foreign actors had infiltrated both the Obama campaign and the McCain campaign. And so the thing is it came out and everyone kind of ignored it. In 2012, we didn't see anything, and I don't think anything happened. But the thing about computer security that's confusing is you never get to really know. Because when you hear about this in the news, they always say things like, and hackers have infiltrated this for the last 3 years, and we only found out yesterday. If you look at the big hacks, like the OPM hack, I don't know if anyone followed this. It was kind of interesting for me because a friend of mine from the Obama campaign was the head of the OPM at that point in time, and so it was interesting to see her, someone who has not really involved in any of the kind of decisions that led up to that, be kind of on the hook for it. But the OPM hack happened, I think in 2011, and then came out in 2014. And so, it sat there for 3 years, kind of just chilling, until someone accidentally discovered it. That's the scary thing about hacking, is that it really is about people, it really is about enemies infiltrating kind of your environment. And so I really felt that we have an opportunity to have our elections disrupted by a foreign entity due to just computers. It could be as simple as disinformation. It could be as simple as, actually leaking. That was a thing that also became very popular in 2011 and 2012, is previous hackers, for the most part, what they would do is they would take the information, they would hoard it. They would take it, they just put it in a database, and they would just look at it for themselves. A lot of corporate espionage and whatnot. What changed in 2011, I don't know who did this, but it started to be leaked. And so when things would come out, they would immediately be leaked. Obviously, WikiLeaks was a big part of this, and eventually Snowden and Chelsea Manning and a few others. But in 2011, we were worried about leaking. That was something we're worried about. And as you can see now, it's commonplace, where in a presidential debate where someone mentions WikiLeaks, which is, for the most part, kind of an anti-government organization. And the thing that's interesting about many of these actors is it really depends what issue you're standing on. They might be your friend or your foe, and you could just switch issues really quickly, and it could be interesting. The Panama Papers are really interesting, but all these are based on leaking and whistleblowing. And so the question then is, is there manipulation by a foreign government? And this is something that's come up in the press quite a bit. And the trick is nobody knows. So is the disinformation the actual statement, this is disinformation from a foreign government? Or is the disinformation the actual information nobody knows? Which makes it really fun and clear. So the trick is, though, I do think that there are, information security issues that we have with our current how the United States works, where we trust certain things too much. And I'm worried quite a bit that there's going to be disruptions during this election or future elections. Whether it's to voting, whether it's to just for instance, if you took down, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton's website for the first couple days before an election, that's not going to be very good. But that's something that, hackers could easily do. Hackers, I should say. Because if you look at the history of some of these events, sometimes the hackers are literally 14-year-olds that are just trying to have fun. Sometimes they're also, foreign governments that are also in some way trying to have fun. But the thing is, you can't tell. And it does take a while to figure that out.
No, and then that's an interesting kind of segue into talking about young people, right? So 14-year-olds. So Harper, I guess, for the sake of the audience, kind of almost going even further back in time and figuring out your background, and then how that compares to today. How do our kids today get to the point where they're into the same kind of things that you're aware of now?
I got two questions. Are there any young people here? Okay, there's one. If you could leave. Okay, well, the second question is, you don't have to leave. I mean, you can if you want to. We're going to talk about secrets, grown-up stuff. The second question, how many people here had an Apple II computer? Or just an Apple computer? How many Commodore people? Any Commodores? I'm sorry about that. So the thing about this is there's a lot of hands that were raised for Apple II computers. Y'all remember the PC, when it started, right? That's when I got my start, was then. I was not an old person then. I was about 5 years old. My father brought home an Apple IIc, set it on the table, and then my brother and I had it hooked up, I think, before he was able to turn around. And I don't know what it was about it that was so compelling or so intuitive, but there was this aspect of it that just said, it was almost this Alice in Wonderland kind of vial that said, eat me or drink me, but it was just hack on me. It was this thing where no matter what we did, all of our kind of world orbited around this computer, whether it was programming or playing games or homework. I remember my mother sending a note home or to school with me that said, Harper needs to type all of his homework because he has atrocious handwriting. And I really blame that because when I got a computer when I was 6, my entire world was about computers. I never really learned to write with my hands. I learned to type. If you think about a 6-year-old, they're still kind of mastering language. They're still trying to learn how to be a person. And I was learning how to be a person and also learning how to interact at the same time. This was interesting as well because it then segued into, trying to get a better computer, which is kind of the computer nerd's dream. Always, how do you get a better computer? You're always doing a better computer. But at this point in time, if you remember, you'd buy components. You would go and buy a modem, or you'd buy a graphics card, or you'd buy a sound card. And all of this stuff was in concert of having this kind of experience, this beautiful experience of I have the best computer. Whether it was for games or homework or whatever, you wanted the better printer, you wanted a faster modem. All these things came together. Nowadays, though, when you break your iPad, you throw it out and you get a new one, right? We don't have this piecemeal experience. We don't have this opportunity to learn, how do I insert a modem into my computer? There's none of this kind of building that was happening. And so I actually worry a lot that, my pattern, or even if you think about some of the more famous entrepreneurs, people like Elon Musk or even Mark Zuckerberg, who's very young, A lot of these people, young people today can't emulate them. They can't emulate us. They're not going to have the same experiences that we have. They have completely different experiences because the paradigm really has shifted. I believe strongly in paradigm shifts. I don't believe that we should be using that language flippantly. If you think about what Thomas Kuhn was saying when he talks about paradigm shifts, he talks about when a paradigm shift happens, the people pre-paradigm and post-paradigm often can't communicate with each other. And he does use that word incommensurable. And I do think when we're talking about the world that young people, when I say young people, I pretty much mean anyone under 25. So that means that's someone who's 26. Any 26-year-olds here? You're old. That's a secret, right? But anyone under 25, they just have a different language than we grew up with that we understand. And one of my favorite kind of thought lessons here, is about photos. When you think about photos, for the most part, if someone says, your house is burning down, but you have a chance to run in and grab something, what are you going to grab? For me, it would be that box of a couple photos. Just these things that for whatever reason have this physical need for permanence. But when you talk about young people, they're like, I don't know, my charger, right? And it's this funny thing because for us, we have these physical manifestations of permanence on all of these items that many people who are younger than us just do not. Neil's probably in the does not way.
Well, I think, Harper, another topic that you make me think of every time with we're sitting up here today, 6 years ago, I can't believe it. It's like we made it, right? But I think about meeting you and that being my first ever real experience or exposure to coding, right? And that's what kind of kicked off my whole career and starting in software school and all that. You tried, but you started it too. But if I hadn't met you, I wouldn't have been in that position. I know one thing that you're really passionate about is making sure that this fast Internet of Things trajectory isn't leaving some people behind.
Well, kind of building on what we were just talking about, I think there's an opportunity right now, especially because computers have become so commodity, and technology has become so commodity. I was actually just in Guangzhou, China, and there's all these factories around. You can find Android phones that are fully internet capable of for everything for like $5, $10. It's really interesting because the internet is full of everyone, right? We talk about the Internet of Things. That's something that's very important. But I really think the internet, up until probably now and going forward, is a little bit of a soylent type of experience. It's really just full of people. And it's this thing where it's like all people. That's what's interesting. I do a lot in commerce. One thing that's interesting about commerce is everywhere as well. And so, for instance, how many people here are on Instagram? A lot of Instagram users? It's really great. You should check it out. But the cool thing about Instagram is you can't really do much on it. It's pretty simple. You just upload a photo, you comment on photos, that's it. In Indonesia, it's one of the biggest commerce centers. And the reason is nobody knows, actually, which is kind of fun. It makes people like me who I'm like, how do I make that better? How do I tap into that? You're just like, everyone's like, I don't know. But the thing is in Indonesia, that's how you buy cool stuff. You don't go to Etsy, you go to Instagram. And this is the same story for almost every single different app all over the world. And what this shows me is that just because I'm in Chicago posting to Instagram, whatever photography I'm doing, doesn't mean that that's the same thing as someone in Indonesia. So what does that tell you? That tells us that we need to make sure that the people building those apps understand the cultural context for me in Chicago, a white dude that lives in a Ukrainian village, to an Indonesian dude who's living in Jakarta or whatever, young or older, whatever. But that's not how we do it. How we normally do it right now is that someone that looks a lot like me makes this app, gets really successful, gets really rich, and doesn't actually think of the cultural context of any of this. We don't think that actually, maybe we should be considering what would a young woman, in Syria, how would she use Facebook? Another friend of mine works in Istanbul building emergency broadcast networks for Syria. And so I was asking him, I was like, well, what does broadcast mean in this context? He's like, well, we just broadcast to social media because there isn't infrastructure to support radio, telephone, etc. But there is social media and there is internet. So what we know about Aleppo, what we know about Syria, what we know about these places that are just bombed almost to rubble, they still have Facebook, they still have Twitter. That's a fascinating thing, but oftentimes the people that are building this software don't have any idea about those people in those places. And this is still happening in Chicago. When you look at the innovation that's happening in Chicago, oftentimes it's usually just white men, which is working out great for me. But we need to make sure that we're also bringing other people into this, that we're fighting this battle to bring other people into that. And we can talk a lot about how there's a social mission here and all that stuff. And I think, honestly, that's great, and I believe in that. But I also think from a capitalist perspective, I want more people to be using my product, and so I want more people. Now, my product, I sound like a drug dealer all of a sudden. I want more people using my product, or McDonald's, right? But I think the key is how do you get more people involved? And I think you get more people involved by understanding the cultural context that people are using these products from. And it doesn't matter what that is. It could be age. So one of the things we did on the Obama campaign is we tried to hire people from all these different cultural contexts. And for the most part, I didn't do a very good job. We tried, and in some ways it worked, in some ways it failed. But then it's always a journey, so the next time we try to do that. And one of the other things we try and do is participate in various schools around Chicago when we can. Because I do think that access, letting some young people see what they could achieve, not through me and through my lens, but through the lens of just being around people who are being creative, building, doing things. Because creativity is luckily something that is distributed pretty evenly.
So what can the people in this room do about this? So this issue you're describing, it's like a lot of people will nod their heads and agree, okay, there needs to be more diversity. Having, a diverse team allows for a product to have different perspectives and improve. But like, what are the actions being done, and what do you recommend, us doing to actually make change?
Probably give you all your money to Neil's Foundation. That's probably the first thing to do. I mean, Neil does some cool stuff, but there's a lot of organizations that are doing this. I don't know. Personally, what I do is I just try and make sure that when we're hiring, we're considering who we're hiring and making sure we're deliberate about it, because I think deliberate decisions are really important in this, and oftentimes we look for the easy decision. I think the second thing is talk about it. I don't know. I don't know what y'all. I don't even know what anyone here does. Does anyone here program computers? Okay, awesome. This is great, actually. So y'all need to talk to some young people about programming computers and see what happens.
Well, I'll give you a statement. So one of the tech directors at Twitter, was recently quoted as saying, "We want to hire more diversely, but we don't want to lower the bar." So what's your reaction to that?
Well, obviously, diverse people are lowering the bar, right? That's what he's trying to say, or that's what he is saying. I'm just going to say it's a he.
It was a he.
Statistically. And I think this is what happens, right? Because we're so often, we have a lot of bias internally, right? I like how we haven't even talked about the speed of the internet. But
well, we got to make sure everyone's caught up.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk about the speed of the internet after this. It's fast. But I think the thing is that we all got bias. Every one of us has bias internally, and you never know what that bias is. I may be biased against, I don't even know. But that's the thing, is it's unconscious. Facebook actually has done some really good training that I recommend startups, that I recommend honestly anyone kind of interacts with. It's free, you can Google it. It's called unconscious bias training. And it's an interesting training. We do it with our teams, where it just talks about, when someone walks in and says, "Hey everyone, I'm really excited to say that, I'm pregnant, I'm gonna have a child." How does the team interact with her? And how do we make sure that when we interact with her, we're not saying, "Okay, well, we're not gonna give you any important projects," right? Because that's this unconscious bias, like that's bullshit, we can't do that. Or if someone that walks in that looks different, if Neil walks into my team, what are they gonna think immediately by Neil just by looking at him? And how do we make sure that they acknowledge that in themselves? Because unconscious bias, you don't wanna just say, "No, I refuse," because you don't wanna fall into that I don't see color. That kind of silliness, because then it's like everyone's just gray and it's like, okay, whatever. But you don't wanna fall into that either. So you have to have this very strong idea that I have bias and please help me and work together. I think that's it.
So as a matter of keeping up, I think the diversity kind of passion of yours it matters as far as the speed of the internet, because as things move forward and as we start to build more products and it becomes more accessible, if we don't have the right people on the train, we're going to have some problems when it comes to...
And I think part of it is the internet is an interesting platform. It's a little bit like, I don't even know a good analogy for it, or what do we just compare it to, but it's this interesting thing that allows pretty much anyone to participate, for the most part, of course. And what that means, though, is the people that are kind of forgotten by the status quo can out-innovate the status quo. And one of the things I really like about Silicon Valley is oftentimes when you look at the Silicon Valley founder stories, more often than not, they are immigrants. And they've basically out-immigrated, or not out, they definitely out-immigrated. They out-innovated, like immigration, but innovation. They out-innovated all the people around them and fought harder and stronger and made it. So whether it's the Google founders, Tesla, a lot of these people did not come from the US. And so what I like to see in that story is that there's a chance that these people that are forgotten by traditional tech can stand up and say, I'm gonna take this. And they can build and they can take and they can create and build an opportunity that actually is better than our status quo that everyone will use. And I have a lot of hope for that. But this won't work unless we're helping the youth get some of those skills, and more importantly, letting the youth know that they have an opportunity. And so I think a lot about what are the words that I can say that tell someone, you too could just do something. Because I don't want to tell them what to do, because I don't actually know what to do. I haven't been 20 in a long time, let alone 15. And I have no idea what it's like to be 15 now. I can't imagine every single aspect of my life being posted to the internet, even though I deliberately post as much aspect of my life as I can. But I couldn't imagine it being almost like, I do it deliberately, but I think for many young people it's done by default or socially, it's the only socially acceptable path. And so privacy is something that's very complicated. Someone said to me last night that one of the things she admires about young people is they learned very quickly that you shouldn't commit to anything to words, only to ephemeral pictures with Snapchat and whatnot. I think that's really interesting, but if you think a lot about what we're seeing in kind of the talk about politics today, it's all about committing things to words. And I don't know how many of you have interacted with people of power, but oftentimes they don't commit a lot to words. There are a lot of, what do lawyers say? Call me. And you're always like, why? I just want to email you. I don't want to talk to anyone. Who talks to people on the phone?
So Harper, in the era of Snapchat and a lot of these other kind of technologies that a lot of young people are kind of very rampantly consuming, what should they be learning? What are the skills? Is it just coding? Is it go learn how to code, or is there more to it?
I don't know. I don't have any idea. I think it would be great if everyone learned how to code, but that's not going to keep them safe.
Yeah.
That's not gonna help people get food if they're hungry.
So what about problem solving then? And using things like coding, but also there's other aspects to technology that need to be explored more at an earlier stage.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't actually have any idea. I don't know if I can answer that question.
Yeah, that's okay. I stumped you.
I'm stumped. But this is actually something I think about quite a bit, is I don't have an answer here, and it actually really frustrates me. Because I'm someone who likes answers, and I don't, I remember once I used to snowboard, and I remember someone saying, how'd you get into it? And I actually have no memory because I've never done anything I'm not good at. And the thing about snowboarding is there's 6 months where you just suck. And I was like, I don't know how I did that. I must have blacked out for 6 months. Because I was just because you don't start, I've never done anything I'm bad at. And the reason is because I don't like to fail. So if I'm good at it, I find a little aptitude, I'm gonna run towards it. Yeah. And I think about that, and it's okay, this is a hard one, because the thing is I remember a friend of mine was in Oakland, and he grew up in Richmond, and we were at dinner, and this friend said, well, why don't, he was talking about his kiddie mentors, and he's like, why don't you help him learn technology and teach him the code? And he's like, well, I mean, that would help, but he's pretty sure he's gonna die by the time he's 19, so he doesn't really care.
Right. So there's this issue where you don't know when you, what you're capable of, or that you could even do something, right? So it wasn't until I met you when I was 21 years old that I saw, overlooking your shoulder, that you had a terminal window up and you were typing these lines of code, and I just happened to ask you what the heck you were doing. And so enabling and how do you create more moments like that for people at a younger stage in areas where that type of luck and opportunity doesn't exist?
I don't know. Internships, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea how it is. I'm struggling with this right now because, generally speaking, because I'm actually thinking about how to solve this from a more practical standpoint, right? Yeah. The one resource that often tech companies don't have is people. We need more people. And so how do you get more people involved, and how do you invest early? I need people in 10 years. I need people in 5 years. We can wait for college. We can do a lot here, but how do you make sure? Is it apprenticeships? I actually think apprenticeships are interesting.
Well, there's a challenge, Harper, because Facebook, recently in the Wall Street Journal came out and essentially blamed the pipeline and said, hey, we have a problem because there aren't enough people who are adults, who are diverse, who are, we can hire.
But Facebook also came out and said that they have literally 6 black people that work there out of 1,000 or something like that. And it's like, I know more than 6 black people that are programmers.
Exactly.
Like, this seems like an easy thing to solve.
So they're out there right now, but also investing in that earlier stage.
Right. I think we have to invest early. I think we have to invest, I was gonna say often, but that sounds silly. But maybe that's right. I think we have to invest early. I mean, I think what we have to do is kind of, how do we emulate in today's age with today's technology the experiences that many of us had? Like, obviously, this person in front that said she was a programmer, like, she somehow got into technology at a younger age, and then it was probably a lot more exciting, I think, than it probably is now, where it's so disposable. I think that's the thing that kind of, when my computer broke, I had to fix it. Like, if I didn't fix it, I didn't have a computer. That was it. There was no, like, oh, I guess I'll get a new one. But today, if I was, for some reason, threw my laptop and my phone into the Chicago River, I would just walk to the Apple store and get the same phone and the same computer, and I'd turn it on and all my stuff would be there. And so there's no punishment. Maybe we just need to make everyone's life harder. I don't know, I was like, wait a minute, I don't know where I'm going with this.
Well, speaking of making everyone's life harder, I think it's time for Q&A. So we're gonna open up the room, and we'd love to kind of have you stump Harper in the same way I did, or happy to answer questions as well. But I think we're gonna have some microphones that people can come up to, and you have the floor.
And we can talk about the speed of the internet if anyone wants to.
It's pretty fast.
We have not yet done that.
Hello. When will the voice recognition replace keystroking, and how's it going to change the speed of the internet in the future?
So this is an interesting question. The question was, when will voice recognition replace keystrokes? Well, I think there's 2 interesting things there. I think one, soon. I think we're seeing that very soon. I guess there's 3. The second one is, I am unsure if it's faster, because I might be able to type faster than I can talk. I think I can certainly talk fast and with a lot of bullshit, but I can type clearer with more clarity. And I don't know if that's just because I've used typing so much, like many of us have, professionally, etc., that I'm used to that. But I think the third thing is probably any solution that we have with that is actually beaming your voice to a server somewhere and returning with your words. And do you really want all of your words sent to some third party that's going to analyze them and use them for all sorts of things that we don't know about? I think that's the interesting question. There's this privacy aspect there. The Amazon Alexa is such a fascinating device. Has anyone seen that device? It's so fun. I really love it. There's a couple things that's interesting about it. One, children love it. They run into an Amazon Alexa and they're talking to it for like 4 hours. And if you listen, it gets super intense. Because they're trying to figure out some big questions with these things, because for the most part, they don't have enough experience in life to understand that that's not a person somehow. And so it's really interesting. But the second thing is that is all that data, all the voice stuff, all those little voices are sent to Amazon for analysis. They're seeing what they said in the cloud and sent back the answer. And so I think in the same way that all of our Facebook stuff is owned by Facebook, etc., all these voice interfaces, our voices are going to be owned by someone else in this kind of analysis sort of way. And that's, I don't know if it's concerning, but we need to be thoughtful about it. Because I actually think that I would probably trade my voice being recorded by one of these folks for being able to just talk to a computer. Like, I'd love to just be like, what's going on today? And have it just be like some stuff, I guess I could just do that. It could just say that every day. But I hope that answers your question.
Hi, you talked about security earlier, which I think is a tremendously big problem. Why is it so difficult to protect from hackers or denial of service attacks? Is there any system hooked up to the internet today that it is safe from that? And will the problem ever be solved?
I have really bad news. The answer is no to every question, to be honest. Like, the problem will never be solved. It's one of the best examples of a great cat and mouse game. There is not probably a system that is secure in the whole world. The only system, like, there is a funny poster that you'd see in security circles that would say the sysadmin security toolbox, and it would just have a pair of scissors. Because the only way to secure a computer is to either turn it off, probably that's the safest one, or disconnect it from the internet. But what's interesting is there was a great kind of scoop and then a book that followed about Israel and the US hacking into Iranian nuclear facilities. What was interesting about this is they did this with a USB stick that they just dropped in the parking lot. And then some, person that worked at this facility was like, oh, a USB stick, I'll use it for my videos or whatever. Brings it in and just plugs it in the computer to see what's in it, and that was it. So they were able to jump into a facility that didn't have internet. So we're kind of all screwed, to tell you the truth. How many people are scared to use their credit card online? Okay, so I don't know what you guys are buying. No one else thinks it's that sketchy, but the thing is I think it's gonna be like that, where it used to be that everyone's hand was up, straight up, I'm scared to use my credit card online. What had happened was both the banks, the merchants, the internet service providers started sharing the responsibility to making sure that we were secure, to make sure that the experience we had was good. So if someone uses your card illegally, the bank will call you and say, hey, we noticed these charges, and and you'll say, yeah, those aren't me. What was it for me? I forgot what it was. Someone used like OkCupid. And I was just like, nah, come on. You serious? Not like I would use a different credit card if I was trying to cheat on my wife or whatever, but that's not happening. So anyway, the thing is the banks whatnot have invested, and the internet security companies have worked with to make the experience better, the user experience, to make it easy. And so we see a lot of neat things like Apple Pay. One of the biggest reasons that Apple said want to do Apple Pay is it's more secure. You see all these things like Venmo or Square Cash, all these things that are more secure. There's still fraud, obviously, but then part of the technology is solving for fraud. I think we need to think about the user experience in regards to security. How many people here love passwords? Everyone's just like, how many people's passwords have their birth date in it? Don't raise your hand. Yeah. This is the thing. Everyone's password is like, no, it doesn't have my birth date, but it has my address. Or my mother's maiden name. No one knows that except, I'm friends with my, brother on Facebook that has my mother's maiden name, last name. So it's like all this information can be gleaned from our kind of what I call the social exhaust. We leave all this stuff around the internet, and we can just get all these information. So when it's like, what is your secret? You have a secret question for your password recovery. It's like, what is your pet's name? And it's like, now you're posting photos of your pet everywhere. So and a lot of this stuff is, or my favorite thing, if anyone's on Twitter, you can find people posting their entire credit card numbers on Twitter. My favorite one recently was this kid, I don't know where he lived, I think somewhere in the UK, posted this picture of his credit card and was like, stupid credit card company, put the wrong photo on my credit card. And it was his entire credit card. And someone tweeted and was like, back to him and was like, is it on the back as well? And so this is the thing, man, is that until we have safety thought about in every single aspect of our computing world, people are going to be doing dumb stuff, right? And part of this, I would say every single system, it's not the technology that is the problem, it's the people. And this happens all the time, right? And I think it'll happen to the best people. It'll happen to the people who are trained to avoid this sort of thing, because we're just people, and we're not, until we get rid of people, I think we're always going to have a problem here. But it's going to get complicated. I'm going to stop talking so we can have another question.
Kind of along the same lines, how about Internet of Things? I heard that talked about a little bit earlier. And in that kind of a world, in my own work, I see a lot of amazing things going on with Internet of Things relative to buildings. A building like this and the ability to have systems that talk to each other, they're all going back to the cloud. I have people talking to me. I'm an engineer, not in IT, but in another field, in energy. And vendors coming to me and, oh, we have this great system, it'll save you energy, and by God it will, or it'll save you water, and it certainly will. But they're taking all of your data, they're going up into the cloud. What's the ability of people then to reach into your building and cause harm, potentially real harm to people, either inadvertently because they're just trying to have fun, or maliciously? And how can you protect against things like that?
Well, I mean, this is actually a really tricky and relatively good question to answer right now. I think it was last Friday, was it? 2 Fridays ago, there was a big attack on the internet that was completely done with this chipset from some Chinese-made cameras, and I don't think this has anything to do with the Chinese, it just happened to be made there, that were slightly unvetted by the manufacturer. And people were able to take these cameras, thousands and thousands and thousands of these cameras, and redirect all of the cameras to attack various sites on the internet. The thing is, these cameras are just cameras that are security cameras in like a 7-Eleven and a bank and here. And because they have this bug, this simple little bug that was just overlooked. Maybe no, it wasn't overlooked. Maybe people looked really hard and they didn't find it. It's just this little bug that someone found. And they were able to redirect all these cameras, and this is the Internet of Things. And this is where it gets complicated, because we, as people who are software developers and whatnot, we spend a lot of our time trying to make things good, or at least good enough. And we really work hard. And so when something like this happens, you have sensor arrays that help you. I have some solar on my house, so we have this box that is like tracking our solar, putting it up to the cloud so that we can make see what's going on. But what if someone was there to take over that? Well, I think it will happen. I think it will happen more and more. And the reason I think that is because the Internet of Things has been so much on the things part and not enough on the internet part that we haven't been focusing on security. And you can actually just see the narrative in the press right now is just kind of like everyone's like, what is happening? Well, what's happening is that it's kind of like a new paradigm of internets, a new type of internets, this internet of connecting all the things together, which is going to result in some really neat stuff. Really cool things, like I can't wait for all my clothes to have chips. So then I can go to my closet and it can be like, oh, you should probably wash that, it smells, or whatever, which is the big controversy in my household. But the thing is I can't wait for that eventuality. But you also you want to make sure that people can't just immediately think, okay, that person has a bunch of expensive clothes on with some little scanner. I'm going to rob their clothes because I know the resale value is high. And so the thing is all this stuff is going to happen. We're going to go through a harder time. I think generally speaking, we're at a point in our society with the internet and whatnot where things are going to get harder before they get better. But I think if we hold together and we constantly have a very good, eye on the horizon, I think we'll get to a point where it actually is really neat and it actually is helpful. Whether it's through basic income, whether it's through free education or equal access to education or better learning tools, whether it's about focusing young people and to make sure their vocabularies are up, whatever these things are, that are going to make our society better, I think that's going to work. But, from hackers to people who are constantly attacking, both for fun or for profit. It's very interesting. I think we have another question at the top. Yeah.
Had a question about what you said about considering how other folks use the software that you develop, whether it's in another country or a different segment, what have you. It made me think of platform business models, and so maybe if you could talk about thoughts on platform business models, whether it's through an API or another way to enable folks to customize your software.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a good answer for this. To translate for everyone who doesn't know what that guy said, I was just kidding, that was the joke. But I don't know how to translate it. I don't have a good answer, but I do think the warning that we have right now is that every business wants to be a platform, and that just won't work. And so there's going to be platforms that are successful and platforms that fail, and we need to figure out how to fail quicker, because we have all of these big businesses that are like, no, we're the platform. And it's like, no, we're the platform. And whether it's APIs, mass customization, whatever it could be to kind of create that opportunity, we're seeing a trend where every startup is trying to create a platform that every person is going to use. And that's just not sustainable nor reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.